Image City Photography Gallery is happy and proud to reopen on June 16 with our ever-popular Black and White Invitational Show featuring 7 of the finest photographers in the Rochester area showing their beautiful black and white photographs. We'll have 7 additional guest photographers showing a nice mixture of color and black and white photographs. We ask each of our photographers to tell us what they're showing with us and talk a little about one of their photographs that will be on display. We hope you enjoy hearing from the photographers themselves what you can expect when you come visit us at 722 University Avenue in Rochester.
I'm going to show a variety of photographic styles, portrait, landscape, creative, and one of my favorites, architecture, in a way that highlights the advantages of showing in black and white.
Well, great. Tell me about that photograph you showed me of the Marriott in Atlanta.
Atlanta Marriott, when I walked in, was an amazing establishment. The internal volume was huge, the design was innovative, and I was just really taken with it. I took a number of photographs, and I noticed that some of them actually resembled like a living and breathing space.
A decade ago, we were in China, my wife and I, visiting some friends, and traveled to this area towards the south of China. We visited these rice terraces. This series is a series of pictures taken on a particularly gray, wet, sometimes rainy day.
Tell me about the one that you picked out to show me today.
On one hand, there is a whiteness in the upper left, and then as the eye travels uphill a little bit, it realizes these are like indeed the scales of a dragon, with lengthy lines that are at first vertical, slightly curved, to now clearly horizontal, fleeting towards the right.
Well, I'm showing a series of my favorite black and whites, obviously, mostly landscapes and nature shots. That's what I like to do most of. I'm just impressed with the range of tones you can get in there, the amount of texture you can get into it.
Well, tell me about that photograph of Mount Sinapa.
Yeah, Mount Sinapa is located in the southeast corner of Glacier National Park. And I originally take my shots in color, process them in color, and then move into black and white. And what impressed me about this when I went to black and white, it really stood out, was the texture in the foreground of the different trees. There's some bare trees, there's some trees with needles on them, and that difference really stood out to me.
The images I'm going to show in the gallery this time don't really have a particular theme. They're kind of my random images, but they're all squares except for one. So one's a panorama, the rest are squares.
Tell me about Winter View.
So that particular image, I had the inspiration for that. I dropped off my granddaughter at that's the Eastman Dental School. I was driving by it and I looked over and I said, I got to stop. So I ran over, took a picture, and maybe 10 degrees below zero or so. I like the haunting look. I like the geometric patterns. I like the little triangles with the snow forms at the bottom of the windows.
Devin was also the featured photographer in our last show before the gallery took a pause for the viral pandemic, and his show was cut short because of that. We're pleased to have Devin back for the Black and White Invitational. Devin, tell me about one of your photos of the bleeding heart flowers.
So I'm showing an image of bleeding heart, and I wanted to be different in the display of it. So it's in black and white, and using a vintage lens that I have from the early 1960s, late 1950s, and it's really good at picking up the detail. And I like the singularity of the bleeding heart.
So in this show, I'm presenting a set of images which I can loosely classify as intimate landscapes. So rather than going for a grand view at a location, I've chosen to isolate a smaller scene within the grand landscape and focus on the intimate details within the landscape.
Tell me about Morning Mystery.
Morning Mystery was captured in Yosemite Valley, and going with the theme of the series, I wanted to focus on a smaller scene within the grand Yosemite Valley. I'm focusing on the fog moving through the forest, and it created a sense of mystery which I wanted to capture in this image.
It's a little bit of everything. There are probably the majority of my photos do have people in them or a person in them. There is some landscape, not overall landscape, but small bits of a landscape, obviously all black and white.
That sounds great. Tell me about Soulful Sounds.
We went to a jazz club one night, and there was this one particular trumpet player. And when he would be playing, his eyes would be closed, his cheeks would be puffed out, and he was in a different world, and his sound was absolutely fantastic.
Well, I have 4 pieces were taken when we were out in Utah. The one that you'll see here was taken as we were driving out of Zion, and it's called Checkerboard Canyon. And this beautiful tree was up there. It was taken with an IR camera, and all the images you'll be seeing will be black and white.
The image that I submitted is called Frozen. This is a color image, so it's not IR, and it's more of a close-up or an intimate landscape, and all of my images will be, similar.
Well, we started in one area of Buffalo. We started by Buffalo's River Works area, and then we went back the next summer and photographed on more of the classic architecture of Buffalo.
Tell me about that building that seems to have the Constitution, but under glass.
It was a courthouse building, and it's funny because I didn't even realize it was the Constitution until I had taken the picture. There was lines running through the background and all kinds of interesting things happening with light.
And Amy, the photograph that you did, that's an interesting effect.
And that was an image that was more architectural, and I decided to play with it a little bit and give a kaleidoscope effect to give some pattern to it that wasn't already there.
Macro is really what I've been focusing on recently. I love the use of color and texture in natural macro photos. But I also have a few horse pictures that I am very fond of that I think I'm going to include in the show, as well as maybe a few structure photos as well.
Maggie, tell me about your photo of the allium flower.
I just love the look of that flower, and especially to get a different viewpoint, not just the flower itself, but to get inside and get the little raindrops on it, I think gave it sort of different feeling.
Pictures that I'll have in the show will be pretty much my usual fare. I call myself a landscape photographer. That sometimes includes wildlife. It sometimes includes country scenics and reminisce type scenics.
Tell us about that photograph bluebells that you sent me.
That's from the Genesee Valley. I tend to like it because it shows some depth. I'm guilty of bullseyeing the tree right in the middle, but I really like that because the flowers wrap around it and fade off into the distance. And that was kind of the look I was looking for.
Thanks to each of our guest photographers for taking time to tell us about their contribution to our 2020 Black and White Invitational Show. We hope you'll come visit us and enjoy our grand reopening and this special show in our 15-year history of showcasing photographs in Rochester's neighborhood of the arts.